Hey guys, what's up? This is Alex Duque. Welcome back with another simple tutorial. On this one, we're talking very specifically about just one particular area of HDR shop. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because sometimes you might get an image of the web, or you can take your own actually, that looks like this. You can actually take your own, like I said. Well, it might require a little bit of Photoshop. If you get what's called a glazed ball, I believe, which is a glazed mirror ball. Kind of looks the same as this, except that it will reflect whatever the environment is on. So actually, if you get a picture like that, you can make yourself latitude and longitude image, which would be something like this. See, so you can use HDR Shop to convert this into this, and that allows you to use it in Maya, assigned to either to a sphere as a dome, or as an image based or texture for an IVL, which we will talk about later. In the meantime, if you do have an image like that, you can use HDR Shop, and version 1 is free, so you can go into HDR Shop and get it for free. You just have to register, and as long as it's for non-commercial purposes, then everything's fine. And once there, you'll find once you open it that you get an image that looks like this. And what you can do is you can open, so I'm just going to import, and there's two types of images, LDR and HDR. LDR means low dynamic range, HDR means high dynamic range. High dynamic range has a floating point, so that means that you have a lot of bits. Let's just put it like that. And LDR would be something like a JPEG, which doesn't have that extra bit amount of bits. So anyway, if you want to open, you can either import or just open. I'm just gonna hit open, and I'm gonna go into my main folder here, and I made a folder called HDR Shop, and here's that mirror ball image. Now when you go ahead and open it, it's gonna tell you that if you want to correct the gamma curve. And the reason why this is because since this is a LDR and it's called HDR Shop, so it needs to be an HDR. You can just change the gamma curve to adjust the exposure level, if you want to call it. I'm just going to keep it at 220, but you can always do this manually, so if you want it to look more like that, then you can totally do that. And once you're done, just hit OK. And that's going to make sure that what you have is an HDR. Alright, so once you have this image, did I open up? Yeah. So there's the mirror ball thing. And what we want to do is we want to take this and make it into a latitude and longitude, which would be a map that, or a texture that Maya would like. And what that would do is, let's put it, I'm going to use my little screen draw here. Whenever you have a dome or what's it called, or an IBL in Maya, it gets the texture that you do is going to get mapped onto it, and the mapping is going to be, usually it's on a square, but to keep it simple, if you stretch that square out so that it actually fits correctly, then that texture, the shape of it, would look kind of like this. Where if this is, I'm gonna say, let's suppose that this is 1000 pixels, then this would be 500 pixels. That's the basic planar cylindrical mapping that that happens. So you would, if you get that, then you're gonna get sort of like a non-distorted image, and that's what we're gonna turn this into. So how do you do that? Like I said, this is gonna be very specific and very straightforward. We're gonna change this into a latitude and longitude. That's what that shape that I was talking about, that's what it's called, latitude and longitude. This is a mirror ball. It's very simple. All you do is you go image, panorama, panoramic transformations. It opens up a window and tells you the source. What is it? So we're gonna say it's a mirror ball, and your destination, what is it gonna be? Latitude and longitude. I'm just gonna make it a new image, and you can tell it, the width and the height. Now if you look at the source, it's 6000 by 6000 pixels. I can get as high as that, but I'm gonna keep it down to 1024 so that this doesn't take too long. You can always super sample and do extra stuff, but like I said, I'm gonna keep it simple. So once you do OK, then it's gonna turn that into this, which is something you can use in Maya. And then all you need to do is you can save it. And once you hit save, you have, I'm going to save it as, once you do save as rather, it's going to give you these two options: to save it as a high dynamic range image or as a low dynamic range image. In this case, we're just going to save it as a low dynamic range. Okay, so I'm just going to say JPEG, and I'm going to call it the same as that, angular map 27, but I'm just going to add the underscore LL, latitude and longitude, so that I remember. And then it's going to ask if you want to save with the current display settings. Just hit yes, and that's pretty much it. Now if you want to save it as a high dynamic range, then you would do the same as, and Maya likes HDR, so you do HDR, and we'll call it map 27 underscore LL, but this would be HDR. So save, and then you can close this, and I'm going to close that, and you'll see that here's my HDR, my LDR. I'm just going to cut this guy and put him under source images, and I've got Maya open with a little project set and a cool looking teapot. One thing I have not added is light, and that's because I don't want to get too confusing here. But I am going to tell you that I am on production settings, and under the comment tab I'm going to take off enable default light. So if I go ahead and make a render, then it's going to look like that, black. I think it's a good idea also to make a new camera. Like that. I'm just going to select it and lock it. I'm actually going to zoom out a little bit. And I am going to lock it. And to be on the safe side, let's render that camera 1, and it should be black. Now, once you have those images, like I said, there's two ways you can map them. One is through a dome, which is geometry, and the other one is through an image-based lighting. Since I will have a tutorial about image-based lighting, I'm going to use the dome version for now. Just going to make a little dome, and whenever you make a dome, just make sure that you take off the cast shadows option, because it's like the environment, so it doesn't really cast shadows. You can do that by selecting your geometry, opening the attribute editor, and under render stats tell it not to cast shadows. So it's pretty straightforward. You can even tell it not to be visible, but we don't want to do that. Okay, so once you got your dome, it's also a good idea to call it dome and assign a surface shader to it. The reason why it's a good idea to assign a surface shader would be the following. I'm going to make a render from my perspective. Now it's going to be black, I know. I'm going to go ahead and add a directional light, and I'm going to aim it sideways like that. Now if you look at the render with the Lambert, you see that the top is lit and the underside isn't. Okay, so that's what happens. That's the reason why you don't want to use that, because like I said, the top's going to be lit and the underside is not. So if you actually bring in your texture, just bring in the low dynamic range, and assign it to the color of the Lambert. If you do that with the Lambert to the color, then this is what's going to happen. See, the top is bright and the bottom isn't. And that's kind of wrong. That, doesn't really make a lot of sense. What you want to do is you want to either map this to the incandescence, in which case I want to keep the color black, so you can see that it's like an environment. Or if you want to make your life easy, you can just make a surface shader and then just map this to the color. I'll call this dome material. So there's your object, which ends up being great. Now I'm going to come here and render my camera 1, and I added a light, so I'm going to hide that light for a second, and then this is going to be all black. But if you were to, for 1, this is no shading, just reflections. If I assign a reflective shader onto my teapot, then you will see the reflections of your environment, which end up having a much better look. And same thing happens if you were to assign a refractive material onto your teapot, because it would refract that environment. Now I made that one red, but I'm gonna take it and make it just fully transparent with refractions, of course. So there, this is refracting the environment. Alright, so it's pretty simple. I'm gonna go back to the default material with flat shader, and I'm going to assign it onto my teapot. Now when you use Final Gather, now again there's no light here on the scene, then what you're going to get is a bounced diffused light onto your geometry based on that actual image. If on top of this I were to show my light, and of course to make it more realistic I would have to put it from the right direction so that it comes from where the sun is, it would make it have more sense. And I also give it a color. I don't necessarily have to, but I am going to give it the color of the sun, just a little bit less saturated, and of course give it some shadows. I use ray trace shadows and soften them up a little bit. So that plus Final Gather is going to give you some of that direct lighting and some of that bounce lighting. Now let's try this same thing, or this same lighting scenario with our reflective material onto the teapot. So you can see that you have a chrome teapot that's really reflective, but you can see some of the bounce of it on here, and you definitely can tell the color of the floor. And I'm going to now give this a refractive material. Now I didn't change the ray trace rays or amount of refractive rays for the light, so I'm just going to increase that to 10. I'll remake this render here, just that little area. There we go. So we have some of the Final Gather computation, we have the refractions, we have the refractions of the shadows as well, you can sort of see them there. Reflections plus Final Gather, and just diffuse with final gather, and we're just gonna make one more render without final gather, and the flat shader. Sorry, it goes a little quicker. And this would be direct lighting only, so you can see how the actual material on the floor is, and then the comparisons. Okay, so that's one way to use a surface shader and latitude and longitude image to make better type of lighting. Alright, so it's as simple as that. On the next tutorial we'll be using the IBL node, and pretty much the same thing that we have here, except that instead of being a dome, it's going to be an IBL. Alright, so till next time, see ya, bye.